have a wide range of participants today representing current discretionary grantees, state vocational rehabilitation agencies, universities, and other VR professionals. And we very much appreciate your time and interest in this presentation. There were a number of individuals who were unable to register for the webinar because we reached our maximum capacity of 200, and this demonstrates a strong commitment to accessibility for individuals with disabilities. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded, as Ebony said, and there will also be an accessible transcript produced. We will send out an email through the RSA listserv with instructions on how to access these materials early next week. We have asked the Section 508 experts here at the U.S. Department of Education to conduct this presentation on Section 508 because we want to make sure that materials supported with RSA funding are available and accessible to all of our constituents. We also want to promote the concept of universal design. So today, our presenters will share some points for creating documents that are accessible from the beginning instead of creating an inaccessible document that will then have to be remediated later. You are probably more familiar with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act that requires equal access for individuals with disabilities to all programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. Today's webinar will help participants understand how to comply with Section 508, which generally requires that electronic and information technology developed, maintained, used, or procured with federal funds be accessible to persons with disabilities. This webinar is particularly timely because we are about to launch the NCRTM website, that is the National Clearinghouse of Rehabilitation Training Materials. This is the mechanism that we will use here in RSA to share materials developed by our grantees, particularly grantees of our training programs. This webinar covers how to use MS Word 2010 to make your documents accessible. There will be future webinars that will cover Adobe PDF and PowerPoint accessibility. Now we need to know a little bit more about you, our participants, so I'm going to turn things over to Kristen Reinhardt Fernandez, who will conduct some polling questions.
Thank you, Roseanne, and hello to everyone. Thank you for your time and participation this afternoon. If we could bring up our first polling question, Ebony, polling question number 1. And I'm going to read the question and your possible answer choices. So the first question is, please tell us who you are. I am a project director associated with a current RSA grant. I work for a VR state agency. And Ebony, if you could kindly scroll down for me, thank you. I'm a stakeholder or other. And if you are other, if you could so kindly tell us who you are by typing in your respective agency into the chat box. That would be great. And we'll give you all a couple of minutes to respond to the first question. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll and see who took the lead here. I don't know, Ebony, if you're able to make the box a little bit larger or scroll up and down so I can see the final tally, that would be really helpful. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so our state VR agencies are in the lead. with about a little over 50% representation, followed closely with the other categories, so hopefully folks can let us know your affiliation, and a welcome to other partners, stakeholders, or grantees that may also be on the line with us today. So thank you all again for your participation. And let's move on to our next polling question. Thank you, Ebony. Our second polling question asks, do you have experience in conducting 508 basic authoring and testing? Your answer choices are, I am experienced in this area, I am somewhat experienced, but could receive more technical assistance in this area, I am a beginner and ready to learn. And your answers are anonymous, so please do not feel shy about your response. And I'm glad to see a lot of beginners, because that's a great starting point for today's discussion. And there are about 30% or so of you that have some experience, and I think that certainly will support you in today's discussion. And we can always use a refresher and learn something new. So appreciate those folks on the line. And a couple that are experienced, and so perhaps we should get your name and numbers and use you all as a TA resource going forward. So I'm just kidding. Again, this is anonymous. So thank you for that. Let's go ahead and close the poll. And we'll bring up our third polling question. Question is, what are your primary questions or concerns about 508 basic authoring and testing? Is it costly? Is it time-consuming? How do I ensure my grant-funded materials are in compliance? Do I have the necessary tools I need to conduct testing? Where do I go for help? All of the above or other. There are no wrong answers here. I'm glad to see that so far most of you are selecting all of the above. So hopefully we anticipated some of your questions and concerns accurately. Certainly do welcome your questions during the Q&A portion of our discussion today. I'm sure we haven't covered everything just yet, so it's good to know we are off to a good start. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll. And we have one final polling question. If any of my grantees are on the line, they know I like polling questions. Our final question is, have you submitted any materials to the new National Clearinghouse for Rehabilitation Training Materials in the last 90 days? Again, this is anonymous, but as Roseanne mentioned, we are getting ready to launch a new refreshed version of the National Clearinghouse, and we're very excited about that. Some of you have taken some time to say yes, but I am not sure if I conducted any 508 basic authoring or testing. Some of you said yes, I conducted 508 testing and authoring. And some of you said no, I have not submitted any materials just yet. And a lot of you, over 98% and growing, have said I haven't submitted anything just yet. But some of you have. And one of the reasons for this question is to let you all know that for those of you that have submitted materials to the clearinghouse, you may be receiving some feedback from our staff at New Additions or through your RSA project officer to let you know if you need to make some adjustments to your material to make sure that it is 508 compliant. And so there's certainly nothing wrong with getting feedback from us as Roseanne mentioned, we do want to make sure that all of our materials are accessible to the field. And so we will be working with all of our grantees and partners and stakeholders as the site launches to ensure that our materials are accessible. So please do not be concerned if you hear from us. We just want to let you know that you may be hearing from us to make sure that we improve on the accessibility of our documents. So thank you. We'll close the poll, and with that, I'll turn things back over to Roseanne Ashby.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Now I would like to introduce our Section 508 experts from the U.S. Department of Education. Holly Anderson is the Policy Liaison for Individuals with Disabilities in the Office of Post-Secondary Education, and Crystal Jones is a Management and Program Analyst in the Office of the Chief Information Officer. I especially want to acknowledge and thank both Holly and Crystal for their hard work and dedication to this important subject matter and for supporting RSA's efforts in the area of accessibility. So now I'm going to turn things over to Holly.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us come and talk about accessibility. It's kind of Crystal and mine's favorite topic, so we get actually very passionate and very excited about talking about this, so we're absolutely thrilled to be here. I'm going to start and give kind of a high-level overview on where this material came from and what's going on with the department, and then Crystal and I are going to do a tag team in actually presenting this information. So where the material came from, the Department of Education has actually been leading an accessible electronic document community of practice across the federal space for the last 3 years. And basically, Section 508, it is up to each federal agency to actually implement what it means to be Section 508 compliant across the federal government. And so that has created in the past a lot of inconsistencies because different agencies have defined differently what it means to be Section 508 conformant. And that has caused a lot of issues for citizens where they're looking at one document and it may be fully accessible, and then another agency defines as well, as long as you have alt text on your images, it's a compliant document. So that's created some problems for citizens. It's created some problems for federal agencies. If somebody's created something really great regarding accessibility, if we have different requirements for accessibility across the federal space, then we can't reuse really good accessible content. And then it's also a problem for contractors. If I'm a contractor with OMB and I'm trying to create accessible content for all of the federal agencies, and all of the federal agencies have different requirements for what it is to create an accessible document, that causes some problems as well. So we are a group, we have about 25 agencies, subject matter experts from about 25 agencies participating, and we've looked at basically, here's what it means to have a Section 508 conformant document at the minimum. So if one agency says, no, I want somebody to do a little bit more, or I think we should add things, agencies are free to do that. But this is the content that we've come up with that at a minimum, here's what needs to be done. We've divided our work into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and PDF. We have actually created a very technical baseline document for agency staff who are responsible for creating 508 guidance in their agencies. We've come up with very technical testing guidance for agencies that may have 25 different testers in their agency. And then we came up with an authoring guide. And this is plain language in English for somebody who is new to this topic, and that's what we're going to be presenting today. So we're very glad that a lot of people are new because we like talking about this, and we think the first place to start is just the basics in very simple terms. What we're going to do, what has been passed out to everybody is the actual documentation, I think, or a link to the website, but the basic authoring guide, and then there's a basic authoring guide checklist. We are going to cover the content in that material, but what you're seeing on the screen right now we actually have taken the basic authoring guide. We start with the requirement, and then we actually have listed an inaccessible example and an accessible example. And what Crystal and I are going to do in our presentation, we're going to do a tag team. I'm going to read the requirement. She's going to talk about the concept and what that means. And then while she's talking, I'm going to be showing, here's what it looks like on the screen. Here's the area you look at. Here's what it means when we talk about a navigation pane. Here's what we are talking about when we're talking about styles, so that you can actually look at that information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Crystal, and we're going to get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. This is Crystal, and today we are, as Holly said, we're going to be going through that Section 508 Basic Authoring and Testing Guide for MS Word 2010. So we've actually laid this document out into 5 different categories, so to just kind of give you a lay of the land and what to expect. We have 5 different categories, starting with document formatting, text formatting, object formatting, color formatting, and then kind of a catch-all at the end for miscellaneous. We have 17 requirements total, and for each of those requirements, as Holly said, we're going to give you, here's how to author accessibly, here's an inaccessible example, and here's an accessible example, so you can be working on your documents yourself. Do want to quickly talk about what this document will not cover. So there are 2 areas in Word that we are not going to cover in this particular document. The first one are macro-enabled documents, so documents where people have gone in and added some additional programming to those documents. We won't be talking about those today. And in addition, forms. We won't be addressing how to create a Word form, and we'll talk more about both of those in just a minute. So let's go ahead and get started with our first requirement under document formatting.
Number 1, save as a Word document, DOCX, with a descriptive file name. A descriptive file name that identifies the document or its purpose helps everyone, including people with disabilities, locate, open, and switch between documents. In addition, the document must be in a DOCX format. The authoring and testing instructions that we're giving today in each section are only for MS Word 2010 documents.
So first of all, we'll discuss how to author accessibly. So we have a document open here, and to check our file name and the type of file, we'll go to File, Save As, and open our Save As window. And toward the bottom of the window, we have our file name.
Document for June 4th meeting, version 1.0, contains inaccessible content for training purposes only.
So this would pass. This would be a good check. It's a very descriptive file name. Then also we have our file type, which should be Word document.
DOCX, right there.
DOCX. So we want to see that DOCX file extension. If you saw something that was macro-enabled, we would need to use a different process to test that. So we can close this out, and we have a couple more examples here to give you a better idea of what file names to look for. We have an inaccessible and accessible example here.
So we're labeling them bad. So again, the description is that it has the purpose. It identifies the document or its purpose, and it has to have a DOCX. So a bad example would be document 1.doc. Doesn't have a descriptive file name, and it's not a docx. Another example, application DOCX. Now that one has this DOCX, but application, which application, not very descriptive. And then we've got another final bad example, yesterday's list.docm. DOCM is a macro-enabled document, wouldn't apply for what we're doing. And then yesterday's list is also not descriptive. What is yesterday? Good examples, OMB Report 387_2014 version 2 DocX, Cell Phone Request Application 2014 DOCX, AED COP Attendees 222-2014 DOCX.
Excellent, thank you. I think the one I'm most guilty of is that document one. I might open up a document and forget to actually rename it something that makes sense, so something that we can easily do. So we're moving on to the next requirement.
The next requirement is use styles to create headings. Headings are used to break up content and make finding information easier. Assistive technology cannot infer meaning from just formatting. So if you just bold some text or you underline text, that doesn't put the formatting to it, but assistive technology cannot get access to that. Styles create a structure that AT, assistive technology, can access quickly.
So to author accessibly, you go to the Home tab and the Styles group. So in the Styles group here, you'll see some preset styles, heading 1, heading 2, and these can be applied by simply clicking the text you want to make a heading and selecting the style you want to use. So we can check our inaccessible example here and see how that was working. So to check our inaccessible example, we're going to open the navigation pane, which I think is already open. To find the navigation pane, you'll actually go to the View tab.
I'm going to shut the navigation pane and walk through how to open
Perfect.
that. Yeah.
Go ahead and go up to the View tab, and then you'll find a checkbox for the navigation pane. And this will open the pane up on the left-hand side of our screen. The navigation pane should have all of the headings that are in our document. So when you look in your document and you have a title, it should also appear in the navigation pane. So for our inaccessible example, we'll look for our major heading in the navigation pane.
And it's not showing up.
And it's not showing up. So we know right away not only have we not identified our headings, but we need to apply those styles. So we can check the accessible example. How should this look in the navigation pane? We'll click on underneath the accessible example. We'll select the major heading there, and we can actually find in the navigation pane our major heading. And then indented underneath our major heading, we should also have our section heading and our minor heading. So basically what your navigation pane is creating is that outline for your document, and this will be able to be navigated by screen readers. So move on to our next requirement.
Number 3, use built-in features to create lists. Lists are used to break up and simplify content. Screen readers cannot infer meaning from just formatting. If you tab and use a slash as a bullet. Using built-in list features creates a structure that screen readers can identify.
So this is one of those things that's really hard to do nowadays. I know if you start typing a list in your document, Word will kind of help you out and automatically start creating that list structure. But if you need to create a list yourself or want to have a little more control over that list, the list features are actually located on the Home tab in the paragraph group. You have options for bulleted list and multi-list options. And there's a couple ways we can check this one. The first way, we can go down to our inaccessible example, click on the list items, at least they're visually lists. They've got little stars next to them, and there's 3 in a row. Now we notice when we select these items, the list options in the ribbon that we just talked about on the Home tab, those are actually not highlighted. So that's kind of our first clue that something's gone wrong here and we don't have a list that's identified. You can also use what's called the formatting pane, and you access that by selecting Shift F1.
And underneath, you should have an option for bullets and numbering.
I think it's under section.
Under sections. But we're not going to see it here. So we can select, with the formatting pane still open, we can select our accessible example. And we'll notice for this example, we actually have the bullets option is highlighted on the ribbon, so that's our first clue. We're doing pretty good here. And then you'll also be able to find bullets and numbering in the formatting pane as well. And this is what we do want to see for accessibility to help with navigation.
Number 4, use built-in columns to organize content. Columns are used to break up and organize content. This item doesn't mean that you are required to use columns, but when you're using a column layout, you must use the built-in column feature rather than creating the appearance of columns by using tabs or spaces. Screen readers and assistive technology cannot read information in the correct reading order if just tabs or spaces are used. Columns create a structure that screen readers and assistive technology can use to read information in the correct order, top to bottom, and then left to right. So there's an inaccessible example and an accessible example. The inaccessible example would be read by a screen reader. Every child is an artist. The problem is, if anything can go wrong, it will. How to Remain an Artist Once We Grow Up at the Worst Possible Time, Pablo Picasso, Murphy's Law. Do you want to tell them
Well,
how to do a
first,
column?
to author accessibly, when you're creating columns, instead of using tabs, we would want to go to the Page Layout tab and use the columns feature that's available here. So to check our inaccessible example, we can do this one of two ways. We can select the text and use our formatting pane again, Shift F1. And underneath sections, this should tell us how many columns we should have. And it actually doesn't have multiple columns. So we can tell this is going to read as one big column, just how Holly read it. Now if we go to our second example and select the accessible example, we'll actually see that columns number change in the formatting pane. And we should have a 2 there. So now we know this is actually going to read correctly. You want to read the...
So how it should read, every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up, Pablo Picasso. If anything can go wrong, it will, at the worst possible time, Murphy's Law.
So another feature I like to use to check quickly whether or not I've got columns here, especially if I'm looking at somebody else's document, on the Home tab in the paragraph group, there's a Show All button. This will turn on the formatting mark. So all of those little spaces and tabs and returns we hit on our keyboard, this will actually turn that on. So we can immediately see with that on, where the inaccessible example uses tabs to create the visual look, but how that actually is going to read incorrectly. Thanks. Do you want to move on to the next?
Number 5, use built-in features to organize content in layout tables. You can also use layout tables to organize content. A layout table does not require row or column headers to describe the cell's content. For example, you could create an agenda with agenda item, introduction, presenter, chair, and time, 9 to 9:15, in a layout table. This item doesn't mean that you are required to use layout tables when organizing information, but when you are using a table format, you must use the built-in table feature rather than create the appearance of a table by using tabs or spaces. Layout tables create a structure that screen readers and assistive technology can use to read information in the correct reading order, left to right, and then top to bottom.
When you use a layout table, you, one, must ensure that you have a reading order that matches the visual layout, and two, must ensure the table is placed in line so that assistive technology can access the content.
So Holly just made a really important distinction that I want to reiterate. Layout tables, if you're using tables and columns to lay out information on your page, again, you're not required to, but if you want to use those formats, when you want to lay out information to read left to right and then top to bottom, that's when you use a layout table. If instead you're actually wanting to lay out information in a top to bottom, then left to right, that's when you would use columns. Again, we're not requiring you use them, but if you do, this is the way you would want to use them. So the other important information, if you want to create a table in your document, the best way to do that is to go to the Insert tab, and there's actually a table button right here that'll allow you to choose the number of rows and columns for your table. But since we've already got some examples here, we're going to use those. So the first thing we want to check with our inaccessible example is the reading order within the table itself. So to do so, we can place our cursor in the first cell of the table and then press Tab. And as we're tabbing, it'll be tabbing left to right, and then top to bottom, it'll move down to the next row. So can you read the order in which that read?
Introduction, and then it went Tom, Sheila, Betty, and then 9 o'clock to 9:15, 9:15 to 10, and 10 to 10:45.
So instead of reading as it should across as it's laid out visually, it's actually reading down and then moving over and reading down the times again. So an accessible example, we do the same thing. We place our cursor in the first cell of the table and tab through. This time we're getting names and then times, so we actually know what's going on. Do you want to read?
Introduction, Tom, 9 to 9:15. Case study 1, Sheila, 9:15 to 10. Case study 2, Betty, 10 to 10:45.
Perfect. So the reading order in the accessible table reads and matches what we see visually on the page. So there's a second item we need to check when we're using tables. We need to ensure that the table is positioned in line. That means in the context of the larger document, it's going to be read in order. So we're going to go from the paragraph that came before the table, then to the next paragraph. To check whether or not the table's in line, we can select the table, right-click. We're going to go to Table Properties, and then see there's a few tabs here. The first tab for Table, we should have an option for text wrapping. What is that set to?
It says none.
So we want to see that it's set to none. Excellent. So 2 requirements for the table. If you're using it for layout, first it needs to read in the correct order, and then it also needs to be positioned in line so it reads in the right reading order for the entire document. Excellent. You're ready to move on to the next one.
Next requirement, number 6, identify distinct languages. A document can contain sections written in different languages. Screen readers cannot infer meaning from just text. Identifying distinct languages creates a structure that allows assistive technology to identify and read all languages correctly. You do not have to set a section language for proper names, technical terms, or foreign words that have become part of common use.
So this is kind of an exciting one for me. We actually, and this is the nerd coming out now, because we actually didn't have this requirement previously at the department, and now we're starting to implement it, and we really are using it. So you can set the language in a Word document. You actually go to the Review tab, Language, and Set Proofing Language. And you'll end up with a dialog box that lists hundreds of different languages here, so you can pick which language you are applying to.
So for inaccessible purposes, it's supposed to say English, but we've got a little glitch in Word, and it really does accurately describe Spanish. But to be inaccessible, it would have Spanish or English.
So what happens is if you there's a check mark to detect languages automatically. So this is something that typically, most of the time, Word will do automatically for you. But, if you're getting a document from someone else or you're sharing a document within your office, you might have some settings that aren't quite right. So it's definitely something you still want to check.
I'm going to show the
You want to do it one more time? So to check, you go and you select the accessible example, review tabs, language, and ensure it's set correctly. And this is another one that you can use the formatting pane for as well if you like working in with the formatting pane. Once you've selected the text, you can press Shift F1, and it'll actually show you the language in the formatting pane.
Number 7, create unambiguous names for links. It is important to provide unambiguous names or context for links that describe the destination, function, or purpose so that assistive technology can correctly identify information. For example, if you have several links and you name them all "click here," then assistive technology will not be able to convey to individuals with disabilities information that distinguishes distinct links.
So to author accessibly, you can type out the text you want in your link. I think a lot of us know now if you press enter space after that link, it will automatically create the link. But you can actually have a little more control over the kind of link you're creating. So if you go to the Insert tab and actually go and insert a hyperlink, this will open up a box that will allow you to add text to the link that is more descriptive than, as Holly said, click here, click here. So in here you would just add the URL and add the text that you actually want to view on the screen. So to check, you can simply look at the links we have listed here. So for the inaccessible one, can you read?
We've got instructions for new software. Underneath that, instructions to old software. Underneath that, side by side, we have 2 buttons, 2 links, click here, click here.
So problem with this one, have no idea which goes with what. What are you going to get when you click here? So in the accessible example,
instructions to new software, and new software is the link. Instructions to old software, and old software is the link.
Excellent. So now not only do we have the links in proximity to what they are referring to, but they're also titled in a way that makes sense to most people.
Next requirement, number 8. Duplicate vital information in headers, footers, and watermarks. Screen readers do not automatically read information in headers and footers and watermarks. Therefore, vital information such as respond by X date, confidential, or do not distribute must also be duplicated at or near the start of the main content area.
So we can actually use the document we're working within to kind of give an example here. And we can actually, if we scroll to the cover page, we can find that we have a header on this page.
Draft document.
And then we've also repeated that information within the page itself. So in the main content area with the title, we have repeated draft. So that's all it means when it says to ensure that whatever's in that header or footer area is also in the main content area. And it's really important to check that on most of the document. The header and footer can be in different depending on which section of the document you're in.
Requirement number 9, use built-in features to create data tables. Data tables are those tables where the information in a cell requires information from a row or column header to adequately describe the cell's content. If a table is used for placement of text and objects, then it's a layout table, and we've already talked about layout tables. When you create a data table, you must, 1, insert tables. You cannot make images of data tables accessible. 2, keep data tables simple. Use one row of column headers and no merged or split cells. 3, identify the header row. And 4, place data tables in line so that assistive technology can access the content. If you need to create complex data tables with more than one header row or more header columns and or merged or split cells, then you must convert the document to an accessible format. Complex data tables cannot be made accessible in MS Word 2010.
Thanks. So again, to insert a table, when we say insert table, you actually would go to that insert tab and use the table button, and you would select the number of rows and columns you would like in your table. So we can go ahead and jump into our inaccessible table, and let's see how they inserted this table. So if we select that first table, what actually comes up on the ribbon are our picture tools. So we know right away we have an image here, this is not accessible, and this will have to be replaced with an accessible table. So we can jump, we have another inaccessible example below this one. So we'll select the table again, or select, you can click anywhere in the table. And this time we get our table tools on the ribbon. So we know, okay, we've got a table that's been inserted here. So now we can start going down our list of other items we need to ensure for data tables. So the second one is keep it simple. Merging cells cannot be made accessible in Word. So to check, we can actually look here. You can tab through your table, or are you tabbing through?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and find that we actually do have merged cells in this table. So the fix for this would be to unmerge those cells. The other thing we can check on this inaccessible table, we can see if the first row is identified as a header. So we can select that row, go to Table Tools, Layout, that's up on the ribbon, and then toward the right-hand side of the ribbon, there is actually a button to repeat as header row. This actually applies some information in the programming of the document, so it won't change things visually, but this is actually what we want to see highlighted to know that we've actually set the first row as the header row. In this case, it's not. The final thing we want to check is to see if this table was positioned in line so that it would be read in the document in the correct order. So we select the table, we'll right-click and go to Properties again. And within here, under Table, text wrapping is set to
Around.
Text wrapping is set to around. So this table may not be read in the correct order within the document. The simple fix for that is to set it to none. So we can close this out and go look at our accessible example, and ideally this will have all the characteristics we need. We'll click on our accessible table, and again we'll get the Table Tools Layout tab, or we'll get the Table Tools tab up in the ribbon. So we know we have a table, it's a real table, it's not an image of a table. Then the second thing, we need to ensure that this is a simple table. So again, you can tab through the table and see if there are any changes in the number of cells in each row or column, and I think we're doing pretty good here. We actually have a simple table. So we're 2 out of 4 so far. Now we can actually select the first row, and let's go see if this is a header row. We go to the Table Tools Layout tab, and we do have Repeat as Header Row is highlighted. Excellent. And then finally, we'll have to select that table again,
and we're going to check whether or not it's in line in table properties, and it is set to none. So no text wrapping means it's in line and it's going to be read in the right order. Great. Thank you.
Next requirement, number 10, create accessible images and other objects. Screen readers cannot infer meaning from images and other objects. Images and other objects include pictures, images of text, images of tables, shapes, icons with hyperlinks, etc. Therefore, 1, you must add descriptive text to images and other objects by A, adding alt text to images or other objects, or B, putting in captions, or C, putting information in surrounding text or in an appendix. You must also place objects in line so that assistive technology can read them in the proper reading order. If you're adding alt text to images and other objects, you must add text that describes the purpose and/or function for meaningful objects. If the object is an image of text, the alt text must match the text verbatim. Or if it's add a space or double quote, space, double quote for decorative objects.
Excellent. So as Holly said, we've got 2 requirements for images. First, we need to have a text description of the image. And second, we'll have to make sure that that image is in line with text. So I'd like to run through the first requirement first. We've got 4 examples here. 2 are inaccessible and 2 accessible. So I'd like to go into each one, and we're going to open up the alt text. So to get to the alt text for an image, you select the image, right-click, and select Format Picture. And the very last tab will be alt text. And we want to see what's in the description field.
Logo JPEG.
So this happens quite a bit. If we pull something off our computer or off the internet, it'll grab onto the file name. That's unfortunately not a descriptive for this image. We can check the accessible version of this image. So we'll close that out and open up the Format Picture again. And the accessible description for the same image is
U.S. Department of Education logo. AEI is for everyone. Accessibility Enhancement Initiative.
excellent. So this was an example of a meaningful image. We described not only the image itself, but there are some text that goes along with that information, so we made sure that was in the alt text. The other 2 images we have are what you might consider decorative. We have some balloons here. So we'll check the inaccessible example, and this might be my favorite example in the whole document, because Holly gets to read this really long alt text.
This is a picture of 15 balloons. There are 4 purple balloons, 2 green balloons, 3 blue balloons, 2 red balloons, 2 brown balloons, and 2 yellow balloons.
Awesome. So while that might be really important if I'm reading the history of balloons, in this document it's actually decorative, and we would not want to hear all of that information. So we would close that out. Let's check our accessible example. And under alt text, we have
Double quote, space, double quote.
So what we're recommending in Word documents, if you have a decorative object or image, put the null or the quote space quote in your description. That way folks know that you've intentionally left that descriptive and they don't have to listen to a paragraph about balloons. So that's the alt text. The other thing we'll want to check is positioning objects in line. So we want to make sure that screen readers read the objects and in the order they're supposed to. This is the one thing that you can actually use Word's built-in accessibility checker for to do a foolproof 100% check. So to get to the accessibility checker, we'll go to File, Info, check for issues, check accessibility. And we'll have a new pane open up on the right-hand side of the screen. There's some stuff in here. We are concerned with objects not in line. So we can expand objects not in line, and you can actually, each object that's not in line will be clickable. So we want to look at the picture that's not in line. And when we click on it, it takes us right to the inaccessible example. So this is one of those no news is good news. If you didn't have anything under objects not in line, you have an accessible document. So, excellent. And we can move on to our next requirement.
Number 11, create accessible text boxes. Screen readers and other assistive technology cannot access information in text boxes unless they are placed in line with text. Therefore, you must place text boxes in line so that assistive technology can read the text you type inside the text box.
So this is another kind of really exciting requirement. You may not know it, but it is. It used to be text boxes were just totally inaccessible. Now they are, as long as we position them in line with text. So again, we would run the accessibility checker, go to File, Info, check for issues, check accessibility. And again, if we expand that objects not in line category, we'll find a text box under there. So it takes us right to our inaccessible example. So you don't have to worry about anything else with the text box, just make sure it's positioned in line and you're free to use it. Perfect. We'll go on to the next one.
Number 12, use color and other sensory characteristics plus text to convey meaning. In order to use color and other sensory characteristics such as size, shape, and location accessibly, ensure that you do not use color alone to convey meaning. If you do, then individuals with disabilities who are blind, have low vision, or are colorblind will not have access to comparable information.
So we have two examples here. In our inaccessible example, we have a table with some status information in it, and it's got, isn't it Project A?
Project A, it's got a green box, Project B's got a yellow box, and Project C has a red box.
So if I could not see the green, yellow, or red, this would be inaccessible to me. So this is a perfect example of what not to do. However, you can keep the same visual look and feel you have. The accessible example looks the same. We've just added some text.
Project A, green means on time. Project B, yellow means at risk. Project C, red means late.
So this is another one of my favorite things because we can still keep the beautiful document and it can still be accessible. Thanks.
Next requirement, 13, create the required color contrast. Having a high level of color contrast between foreground and background results in more people being able to see and use the content. However, there are standards that are required and listed below. Table 3, table with color contrast ratios by text size or type. If the text size or type is standard, the contrast ratio at a minimum must be 4.5 to 1. Large text, which is defined as 14-point bold or 18-point regular, the color contrast ratio at a minimum must be 3 to 1. Incidental text, text overlaid on images, and logo types are excluded from the requirement.
So you might be wondering, how on earth am I going to test color contrast? There's actually an awesome tool that you can use called the Color Contrast Analyzer.
I forgot to download it, so I'm downloading it.
Don't you have it on your Internet Explorer?
Yeah, I do.
You have the
What2Walk.
What2Walk. So
okay.
She's going to pull it up. You can actually download the Color Contrast Analyzer. It's an executable file, meaning you can download it to your desktop and run it as you need. She's going to pull it off of another accessibility tool. Oh, is it
It might take longer than...
Is the color not coming up on the toolbar?
Actually, I'm going to do it the other way. I think it's faster.
I use this a lot, so I actually started, because I review documents every day, I started pinning it to my programs down at the bottom where you have all of, where your start menu is, and find it pretty easy to use from there. So if you find yourself playing with a lot of color, that would be a way to go.
Oh, you've pulled up the... Did I push the wrong button? Just want to open it. There we go.
Yay. Well, this is good. Everybody can see. It's pretty easy to...
And when you
Get
push
to.
the download button, it's not something that has to be downloaded onto your machine, it just opens it.
So you can save it to your desktop, but you actually, the thing that I'm usually thankful for, I don't have to have admin rights. I don't have to go get an IT person install it.
Okay,
So,
I'm ready.
Yay, now
Sorry
we're
about
up and
that.
running. Nope, that's great, actually, because I think that only took a minute to get it installed, or to get it running. So you can literally, with this tool, there's some eyedroppers you can use to select your foreground and background text. So we're going to test some text that's inside of a table. Our inaccessible example might be obviously difficult to read. It's pretty bad, but just if we want that confirmation, this tool will give it to us. Did you get the...
No.
Oh. So
I'm
we'll...
going to do the background first, and I'm just going to click on the eyedropper, and I'm going to pull this onto the background, and then I'm going to click on the eyedropper and put it onto the text of the foreground. And you can see here it fails.
So at the bottom here, there's two different levels. There's AA and AAA. We are looking at AA for our requirements. And it definitely, you get your big X, total fail. So we can see what pass looks like. We can use our eyedroppers again.
And so our accessible example passes.
So we get some check marks here. So that's what you're looking for. Under AA, you're looking for a check mark. So, excellent. And then I think we're...
Next requirement, create accessible embedded files. If you embed an audio-only, video-only, or multimedia file that contains meaningful information into your MS Word document, you must also provide additional information so that individuals with disabilities have comparable access to the information. In order to author accessibly, if you have an audio-only file, you must also include an accurate and complete transcript, and that is a transcript of text is a text version of exactly what is being said in the audio-only file. If your file type is a video-only, you must also include an accurate and complete text description, and that is a description of the text version of what is being shown in a video-only file. For multimedia, audio, and video, you must provide an accurate and complete synchronized captions and audio descriptions. Captions are a time-synchronized text version of exactly what is being said and/or a description of the relevant sounds in the multimedia file. Audio descriptions are time-synchronized descriptions of what is being shown in the multimedia file.
I don't think we have examples for this one.
We don't have examples because we could pull them off of YouTube, but then they took a really long time to run. Usually we do these over webinars. We don't see this a lot, but we're becoming a very hip, high-tech society, and as we do that, that's fine, but you must make sure that that hip stuff is accessible as well. Next, 3 requirements. Avoid forms in MS Word 2015. You cannot create an accessible form suitable for publishing on a website using MS Word. If you need to create a form, other applications may be more appropriate, so please contact the Assistive Technology team for assistance. The AT team will help analyze your business need and make an appropriate recommendation. Number 16, exclude flashing objects. Federal agencies do not typically see flashing objects embedded into MS Word documents. Since flashing objects may be a public safety issue for individuals with photosensitive epilepsy and there is not typically a compelling business need, flashing objects should be excluded. If you feel you do have a compelling business need, please contact the AT team for assistance in ensuring how your object flashes below 3 Hertz. 17, alternative accessible version. Federal agencies have the goal to produce one accessible document for everyone. However, there may be times when this is not feasible. Therefore, it is recommended that you contact the AT team to ensure an alternative version is necessary, as you are still required to create an alternative version that is accessible, up-to-date, and has equivalent content. Excellent. Do we have time for questions?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all the material we
Yeah.
have, so we'd be happy to open it up for any questions people might have.